Hi everyone, this is Anu, and we are walking the history of mankind, and there's been a couple of interviews done by the Atlanteans that I suppose experienced within existence the most extensive shock of the moment where everything in existence changed forevermore. And the Atlantean mentioned where my, one can say, existential childhood started as a young one in the dimensional existence before the creation of human beings and Earth and this physical existence, and how I came into existence during the time where the origins of everything and everyone had merged into individual beings of all the races and the planets and the existences and the universes and the creations. So it was during the time where existence was already in a process of extensive change, and I'd essentially walked into this existence of change. And for myself, as a young being that emerged from existence into existence, it was quite an interesting experience in where I remember as I was emerging into becoming a conscious entity where I could experience within my very beingness all of the movements that was underway within existence. It was interesting emerging from within existence in that you, in your very, and as your very beingness, feel every part of existence. I could feel all the beings, I could feel the planets, I could feel the beings' presences, their individual experiences, their views, their differences, their similarities, the very nature, the very substance of existence in all its multi-dimensions, all the layers that created the structure of what was here within existence. You could experience the very detail of everything, and so that very emerging was an experience of literally coming out of and from everything and everyone within existence. Like threads were taken from all the individual parts and particles and dimensions and molecules and resonances and layers and relationships and languages and purposes and beingnesses. It really felt like all these threads were pulling out of the entirety and totality of existence and coming together to this one point that emerged as me. And I remembered that experience in detail always, from when I was young, and it always remained with me in that I experienced the interconnectedness with everything and everyone, not from a observation, self-reflective perspective, meaning where I would observe other beings, other races, and parts and manifestations and expressions of existence, and directly relate me as being that. It was more me coming from that. So there was a connection, but not to the extent where I believed that I was equal to it in any way. The oneness was understood, but not the equality, because whatever emerged as me, as all these threads from existence coming together to this one point and merging together to manifest me as a being, was simply parts, and therefore it could not be an equality, because to me an equality would be me being in my entire and total beingness a part or a being or a dimension or an expression or a creation or a planet, and that was never experienced by me, where I could look at a being and say, you are me. It was more, I am a part of you, that is our oneness, but no equality. And from that experience, I obviously, as I emerged into existence, was curious about my origins and what my race at that time explained to me as to where I came from was from the breath of our ancestors. And what I mean by breath, understand that how I am speaking here and sharing our history within existence, we are wording our very beingness, our living force, our participation within existence during that time. So it's almost like a translation, so to speak, that is expressed here, and therefore I will utilize the most specific words to explain and give perspective of how everything was back then and how we explained and communicated and interacted and expressed and behaved. In this example was with the beings of my race that had gone before me in explaining how the breath of the ancestors was like the life of the ancestors. And within our race, we believe that when you cease to exist, your force, your beingness, your presence, your remembrance is then stored within the resonance expressions that manifested within our universe, our existence. So when you'd look up, you would see these resonance balls of expression that was the individual signatures of the beings that had passed or ceased to exist, and that they would release their force, their presence, their beingness as a substance, and within that gift, life, birth, emergence to a new being. That would be like a part of themselves that they give away so that a new can step forth. And that, in terms of what they explained, was not what I experienced within my emergence into existence. I experienced me coming from the totality of existence. I had all the races, all the planets, all the existences, all the creations, the manifestations, the dimensions. I mean, everything I had an awareness of within my very beingness. It wasn't defined, meaning I would not be able to say which experience or movement was which being or which manifestation or which part within existence. It was a beingness knowing and understanding that I am more than where my race had initially explained to me we come from, because if I had come from our ancestors, I would only be experiencing the ancestors, but I experienced so much more. And during that time within existence, with, as the Atlantean female explained, the life source substance connection within the beingness of existence had been severed at the time where I emerged into existence. And with that, our very forms had started changing in how we emerged from within existence. I mean, each race had its individual, unique way of how the new beings or young ones would emerge into existence. But with my race, our very forms were busy changing, in that there was a lot more definition within our very forms. And for example, previously there would only be, to give a practical manifested description in terms of what our forms and our beingnesses look like within an interdimensional, dimensional context. It was like molecules vibrating, and we experienced that, and this is my race's beliefs within existence, that our forms, our form vibrations of molecules was simply a containment within which our beingnesses could express within this existence. Whereas if one had a look at how the Atlanteans walked their beliefs was that the very beingness and the form was emerging from the life source substance of existence as a whole. But us reptilians, we only considered our beingness coming from life source substance, from what was here within existence, and our forms, as the Atlanteans also refer to it as the physicals, just to give a reference in terms of when we're speaking of our shapes, our forms, our dimensional bodies, that was simply a containment, a vessel. But a existential unifying belief was that there was something greater, something more and powerful and magnificent and great within this existence. And as I, as a young being, was welcomed into existence, and the more and more that was explained to me in terms of this powerful source within existence, which we'll simply always refer to as life source substance, in that existed as a quiet, separate presence within existence did not make sense to me, because again, it did not relate to my experience of emerging into this existence, that I came from everything and everyone here. All the parts, particles, manifestations, expressions, all came together into and as one point that emerged as me. So how is it that there is a separate presence within this existence when all I could find within me was myself, within the experience of all of existence? And it was a constant presence within me, meaning I could feel the movements, the expressions of everything. And again, it wasn't a defined specific relation. It was a knowing. I did not communicate this experience with anyone. I was quite a secluded young one within existence. I enjoyed observing beings, interactions, creation processes, as beings were scurrying about on the planet and creating and structuring and communicating and interacting. And that was my state of being, my presence for a really long time. And I always referenced what was happening within existence to what I experienced in my birthing, because there was no way that I could deny what was me, in fact. And the more and more I interacted with my own race and other races, the more I was gaining perspective on various beliefs about who we are within existence. And none of them related directly to my experience of emerging. And this questioning within me of where it exactly is that we come from and who is it that we really are was what had taken me to the point and ability of establishing a point of power over everything and everyone in existence. One being, one point, having existence, and this is literally everything and everyone in my hands, was a experience that is indescribable. And I wanted to hold on to that experience of power, of knowing that you have absolute control of another being, all beings, races, planets, multi-dimensions, existences, universes, the very substance of everything. I had it all in my hands and in my hands only. And from that experience of wanting to hold on to that power always is what evolved the process of what is now referred to as enslavement. I did not have a context of enslavement per se during my reign as God, and it was simply within my experience of wanting to hold on to power and to make sure that I hold on to it. And I simply categorized and organized and layered and changed existence, placed positions and altered beings so that I could have everything and everyone. I will, as we're continuing with these interviews and I come through the portal that was my end, walk the timeline of my emergence within existence and how I interacted and observed and give some insight into the races and existence and our relationship towards other races and existence as a whole. How I formed my primary relationships with Marduk, Enki and Enlil. I mean, who we were as young beings within existence, and already at a very young age within existence, we were quite an interesting, active bunch, and we developed our processes of creation and interaction always one step more than what was always allowed within existence. Meaning that there were, during the time that I had emerged within existence, there were strict protocols in terms of how beings were allowed to interact and create and merge and evolve, because the adults and elders of all the races were fearful of losing their heritage and past, and was trying to hold on to that, when I essentially became the direct opposite of holding on to the future, creating the future. And go into detail of how exactly it is that I myself, as one being, took control of existence. What is it that I realized that gave me that ability? Which makes one wonder, really, that did I really enter into this existence as a self-directed consciousness, or what I emerged from, what I became, and what I had done had always been planned? That question will be answered within interviews to come. Maybe you will see this thread throughout the interviews yourself. I mean, even back then within existence, my very birthing was not self-directed, meaning I, during that time, would not be able to explain to you where it is exactly I came from, in how it is that I formed and manifested myself into an individuality, why I created myself into that particular nature of beingness. What is beingness really? Why have we throughout time been individualized? I mean, this birthing process has been existent throughout time, in as far back as where beings could remember from where we came. And even now in this physical existence, you have a birth and death process. Even within the existential process that stepped forth when the portal opened, there were processes of birth and death, always. I mean, if we simply have a look at who we are now within this world as humans, when you sleep, death; when you wake, birth; when you are one person, one moment, then death, then birth as a new person next moment. thoughts, birth and death, breathing, birth and death. This manifestation of birth and death is all-encompassing in everything and everyone. Within our very self-experience, mind experience, physical experience, and everything in between, it's everything stand within and exist within the nature of birth and death. Why does birth and death exist? Why do we have to birth and die? Why does everything have to birth and then die? What is it that we're missing? What is it that this process of birth and death is really showing us? Are we missing here? What is here? What has here been? I mean, even within the time of where I existed, this point was missed, birth and death. I even created birth and death within the processes of reincarnation that human beings went through. What was I showing myself with what I was creating as human beings, as earth, as this physical existence, as the processes of birth and death? And obviously they did not understand it or contextualize it in terms of considering this point of birth and death, but if you really look at it, that's how everything is existing. So we're being recycled. I mean, not only us, but everything and everyone in existence is being recycled into birth and death, and birth and death. So this is a point that you will realize for yourself as I walk you through existence, through me, and come to understand why birth and death really exist and what it is that we've been trying to teach ourselves. Obviously not quite so successfully as yet, but let us see if what is shared through a story initiates your story within yourself and your life, and whether you will realization is always possible in one moment. And it's interesting, I mean, even within walking my own life now through these interviews, I've walked it before within existence in detail. How many times I missed the obvious. So many times. All the time. I mean, by the very fact of how we are existing in the experience of separation is already the very obvious point. And how throughout time we've been fighting for this experience, not realizing what is within and behind that very experience of ourselves, which is so much more than what at this moment can be described or conceived. And I can very much understand why I was not given access to that within existence. I'm certain I would have simply, with not understanding what power really is, caused a complete moment of deletion within everything and everyone. And how I realized that even though I experienced myself being a power, being a god within existence, I was simply being used to create what is here within this physical existence today. And obviously that realization placed quite a knock on my ego. That was the most difficult point for me to face. That I was not in fact the power that I believed myself to be, but that there was more at work within existence than just my individual experience of power, and that very individual experience of power was not really real. It was simply used to motivate me into doing what I was supposed to do. So here are some points to reflect on in the time being as my introduction interview to when I will start working my history, which is the history of you and this physical existence. And may these interviews assist and support with realizing that there is much more at work within this existence than just your idea of yourself. And one only has so many opportunities and so many chances, and that there is a point where it is too late. And many still within this existence is wasting time. There is such a thing as time at the moment. This physical existence is the manifestation of time, and its time is being stretched to allow for windows of opportunity as realization to emerge. But there's still an extensive amount of everything is okay, everything's fine, I'm okay and I'm alright, I've got time, there's lots of time, I just have to do this little bit here and this little bit there and just wait it out. Careful, because that reality can prove to you that you've been within a absolute illusion of who you are within existence. So don't wait until it's too late. I've been there. I am there. I am in too lateness. And now all I can do is speak here and show the way. You have to realize the way as yourself. We don't have time, but there is time. There is time in the sense that you still have your windows of opportunity to realize, and you can even see the windows of opportunity that is available there before you. And there are really only so many, because those windows of opportunity can only come in relation to how existence and humanity as a whole is moving. If you miss your chance, you've got to wait, and then there's another chance, And if you miss it, you've got to wait again. And you can only wait for so long because you're in the movement of this physical existence as well. So existence is not going to go, I'll wait for you. Realize time is moving in this physical reality. Your body is aging. You've only got so much time as the movement of how everything and everyone in existence is moving. So this is my point for you this evening, and there will be in every interview such a point to consider in your process. Give it everything you've got all the time, and you will realize things that you could never have conceived possible to exist. Thank you.